What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Floyd Street's Finest, presented by Great Flood Brewing Company. I'm your host, Jeff Greer. Thrilled to be back here in the saddle with you for another episode. We are, of course, part of the Field of 68 Media Network, and we are crushing the game, I have to say, the Field of 68 during March Madness, during the NCAA tournament. If you have not already subscribed and followed all of the Field of 68 avenues that you can, you got time this week before the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 tip-off to go find Field of 68. They're doing a wonderful job breaking down games, talking about all the different storylines, talking about the coaching carousel, and certainly getting into a lot of different subjects with some really smart basketball people. Field of 68, you can find it on YouTube and, of course, on all the other social media platforms. And I should mention, if you are a fan of Floyd Street's Finest, please go leave us a rating and review. I think the Arkansas fans have dissipated on the one-star reviews now that the coaching search is over, and we have plenty to talk about today. With Kenny about Kenny Payne. We are aiming to get him on Floyd Street's Finest. We will get him. Believe you me, we will get Kenny Payne on this podcast at some point. I've already got a bunch of questions that I think are going to be interesting to ask him. We could probably do an hour-long episode with him. Probably won't be able to do that, but certainly have a few questions that I want to talk to him about. For today's episode, I brought on a friend of mine who covers recruiting as well as anyone in the country, and that is Ben Roberts from the Lexington Herald Leader. Obviously, he also covers UK, so he knows Kenny Payne really well. So we talk about a number of things. Kenny Payne's personality, maybe Ben's, or not maybe, Ben's thoughts on how his demeanor translates as a head coach, as a recruiter. We talk, of course, about the Nike Adidas thing that everybody's talked about. Worldwide West comes up. And, of course, we talk about DJ Wagner and try to get into some style of play stuff too. But I guess that one's just one big shrug emoji because I think we all are just waiting to find out what that looks like down the line. But no, it's a really good conversation, and I'm looking forward to having Ben back on over the summertime as we continue to track the DJ Wagner recruitment. I think Louisville and Kentucky are about to absolutely go to battle over a bunch of different recruits now that Kenny Payne is wearing red and black again. Before we get to Ben, a couple of other house cleaning items. I hope, against hope, that you did not use my bracket. I hope you did not use my picks. I don't know anyone who uses anybody else's picks, but if you were someone who does that, all I can say is I'm sorry. It's been a disaster the first 4 days for your boy here, although I am doing okay in my survival pool. So I know you're all very concerned about that. The one other thing that I would just say is there's been a lot of names flying around on the coaching search or assistant coaching search side of things. What's the staff going to look like? Absolutely fascinating stretch coming up here where we find out who is on the staff, what roles they have, and then we're going to start hearing about recruits pretty quickly after that. Tyrell Ward, who was on Louisville's radar before he committed to Xavier, reopened his commitment with Travis Steele getting fired at Xavier and Sean Miller returning, and has already said that he's heard from Louisville. I think he's a type of player that Louisville needs. I would expect there to be maybe a couple more transfers, not a ton, but a couple more, as long as Kenny Payne wants to keep them. But Kenny also has to think about what he thinks they can get in the transfer portal and what he thinks they might be able to get in recruiting. I know Kamari Lance has been posting about trying to get Sky Clark, the former Kentucky commitment, who is a lead guard for Louisville. And we know Louisville needs help in the backcourt right now. We're trying to figure out and trying to assess who's going to come back and who's not. But even if everybody from last season who is eligible to come back were to come back, the biggest thing that Louisville would need, I think, is help handling the basketball as a primary initiator of the offense and the lead defender on the other end of the floor. So we'll find out all those things very quickly coming up in the next couple of weeks, and then gear up, because this summer is going to be a really fun summer for recruiting. If you love following recruiting tales, there's going to be some. And as we get into with Ben Roberts, Kenny Payne is not someone who's going to be leaking a whole lot of stuff to people. Some coaches do, some coaches don't. Maybe his staff will, but Kenny does not like doing that, and it's going to make it for a lot more trying to decipher some things, I think, than maybe in previous years with different recruiting efforts from different coaching staff. So lots of fascinating stuff to get into, and consider this an early conversation in it. As we go along through the I know this is technically the off season now for Louisville. We will transition at some point to maybe a different schedule over the off season, but I want to tell you right now, over these next few months, what I really want to do is talk to a lot of people who know Kenny Payne, because I think that's obviously the biggest story right now with Louisville basketball. And so it is on my highest list right now of efforts to get Denny Crum, to get Milt Wagner, and to see if we can get a couple other guys from that era and guys who know Kenny Payne well, maybe even from outside of the Louisville realm to talk about him as well. So I'm looking forward to those opportunities. And of course, as the assistants are hired and people join the staff, as time permits for them, we will of course have them on as well. Cards fans, Great Flood has gone all out all season, and it's not too late to get in on this, because the Louisville women's basketball team continues into the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament. All Cards women's basketball games this season, 10% cheaper beers, drinks, I should say, for the entirety of the game. This pricing is available at both the Highlands Tap Room and Middletown Restaurant. We love hosting you and can't wait to root along with you as we cheer on our Cardinals. And they always, of course, thank you over at Great Flood for your loyal support. And of course, go Cards, as they say. And as a side note, we are now expanding our options in our tap room for the first time in 7 years, offering wine by the glass or bottle and liquor and cocktail menu. At this point, I've been saying it on the way soon. Go check it out. For Sundays at either location, you can enjoy endless mimosas. Now, got a new one for you folks. This is exciting. Today's episode of Floyd Street's Finest is also sponsored by Honey, the easiest way to save money when shopping on your phone or your computer. Have you ever been in this spot? Lord knows I have. You're shopping for something online. You get to checkout. When it asks you for a promo code, you start Googling, trying to find a way to save some money. That is definitely something that your boy here does. Thanks to Honey, manually searching for coupon codes is a thing of the past, because Honey is the free tool that scours the internet for you and finds the one that best fits your card. Here's how it works. You're shopping, you head to checkout, that Honey button pops up for you. You click apply coupons, you wait a few seconds, and you watch the price you pay go down. That sounds like a winner to me. If you have not already downloaded Honey, you are straight up missing out, and you should be. By getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid and supporting the show. I'd never recommend something I don't use. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/March Madness. That's joinhoney.com/March Madness. Hop on that while you can. And of course, before we get to Ben Roberts, we also have to tell you a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up yet with Bet Rivers Sportsbook, this is the time. We're running out here. Sweet 16 weekend coming up. Tickets to the Final Four will be punched. Let's get on it. They're offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. What sets them apart, though, is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. And with their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more reliable, and more secure. Basketball season is at its peak right now. We have reached the promised land. Folks, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. You must be 21 years or older. And if you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right. That's enough of that. Let's talk to Ben Roberts in this week's episode of Floyd Street's Finest. All right, we are joined by the Herald Leaders, Ben Roberts, a friend of mine now for, pushing 9 years, Ben, since I got to the market here, and I've always had a lot of respect for you as one of the best guys covering recruiting, college basketball here in the Commonwealth and across the country. And of course, you know what we want to talk about today. Louisville making the hire, of course, of Kenny Payne. You have been around the program when he was there as John Calipari's right-hand man. You were on top of a lot of recruitments involving Kenny Payne, kind of taking the lead on them. So let's just kind of start generally, Ben, with just your thoughts on, I guess, his demeanor, his personality. I think people here saw a good glimpse of it with his opening press conference, that he's just kind of this even-keeled, kind of cool cucumber type guy. But how would you describe him as a person around a basketball program?
Yeah, I think any fans, anybody who watched what happened Friday with the introductory press conference and the Q&A with reporters and everything that followed, that's Kenny Payne. I think I think he killed that press conference, as I assumed he would. And I think that was a perfect summation of his personality. And he's the type of guy who he's pretty quiet. He's fairly low key. He's not like an over the top exuberant guy. And I think that kind of came through too Friday. You see guys, I feel like in those situations, try to perform a lot of times. He doesn't do that. He's who he is, and he puts it out there, and you get what you see, and that's kind of how he is. In his press conferences that he had here, he had several of those at Kentucky. If you could get him at a recruiting event or on the side somewhere, he's just that cool, measured guy who just kind of talks to you like a human being and carries himself that way. So I think as far as with players, I'm sure a lot of Louisville fans have read throughout the years what former and current Kentucky players had to say about Kenny Payne. And, you talk to guys in the league now, you talk to guys who cover guys in the league now, and you talk to the recruiting guys, and a lot of these former Kentucky players talk as much about Kenny Payne as they do John Calipari.
That's true.
By the time they get to the pros. I mean, he was kind of that, big brother figure. Some called him a father figure. I think the uncle figure is the one that you kind of heard the most. Yeah. And the one that I think, probably rings the truest. He was just kind of that guy that everybody felt like they could depend on. If they needed something basketball wise, he was always there. If they needed something in their personal life, he's somebody they could talk to and just, be kind of that almost a spokesman for the coaching staff or Calipari's obviously at the top of the food chain there, but Kenny was the guy who I think at least a lot of times to the players was kind of the face of that staff for a long time that he was here.
Well, there's so many different directions that I want to go with this. And part of it was, back to your point about the press conference. I mean, I thought it was a really cool moment when he had all of the other former players and the current players stand up. And I think, and both programs are like this. Indiana is like this. Obviously, any program that has a lot of tradition, the other ones, Kansas, North Carolina, Duke, all those programs where there's that level of respect that just as generation to generation of player that they carry with them. He obviously was part of, I tweeted this, one of the two championship teams that kind of cemented Louisville as a powerhouse in the college basketball landscape in 1986. But he also then spent 10 years as the right-hand man for public enemy number one for Louisville fans for a long time, although I think that's kind of thawed a little bit. I still think people don't like him, Calipari, but I think it's calmed down. I think it's calmed down a little bit just because Pitino is not around anymore. Yeah. But how do you think Kenny's experience as a player shaped him and helped him be the recruiter he is and be kind of the person around a program that he was at Kentucky and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously wasn't around when he was there in the 80s at Louisville, but you can tell with guys like that, especially former players, and especially former players who had a lot of success. And obviously Kenny played in the NBA and we know his college success. And then how they act as coaches. And a lot of them, I mean, Kenny relates to players. He knows, John Calipari played college basketball, but he didn't play for a national title team. A lot of these great Hall of Fame coaches weren't in that situation that Kenny Payne was in, playing at the highest level of college basketball for the best team for at least one season in college basketball. So he he knows what they're going through from when they're 15 years old, and guys like him are starting to recruit them to when they're 35 years old on the tail end of a professional basketball career. And he can relate to the different points along the way. And he just, kind of going back to his demeanor and just the way he carries himself, I think also has the personality that lends itself to being a guy who can do that successfully. I think there's a lot of people who obviously know what that's like to be recruited and to be a college star and to be an NBA player.
Mm-hmm.
But if they go and try and coach or try and mentor or whatever, it's sometimes hard to teach, or it's hard to get across. And I think Kenny Payne, maybe his greatest strength is relating to players and their families and the people around them, and just making kind of everybody feel comfortable. I mean, John Calipari's kind of cultivated a program and a culture at Kentucky that is very much built on family, and he's obviously a huge part of that. And Kenny Payne for 10 years was also a really huge part of that.
Let's delve into the recruiting side of it, because I think that was obviously going to be a big sell for Kenny coming back to Louisville, or really any job would be, hey, I've got these relationships. We know about the relationship with like Purvis Ellison running his AAU program. We'll talk about DJ Wagner in a little bit, but you talk about the connections to World Wide West. I mean, there's no way around it. That's a relationship that exists with Milt Wagner, with a lot of coaches around the country. We talk about the relating to people and the relationships, and Kenny talked about recruiting families and not just players, but recruiting everyone in their circle, whether that's his parents, whoever it is, trainers, coaches, whatever. But talk to me a little bit about, I guess, his approach to recruiting as a guy who probably took the lead on a lot of the recruiting situations from more like a strategy standpoint. We know about the relationship side, but is he a guy who like breaks down the wall every 10 seconds with somebody? Is he somebody who is just kind of a smooth operator? Describe to us what he's like as a recruiter.
Yeah, I never really got that sense that he was really the in-your-face type of guy, and it was kind of hard to get a handle on him there, because he's not a guy. I think people who follow recruiting know that a lot of coaches will talk to people behind the scenes and kind of let them know what's going on. And Kenny Payne was never that guy. Kentucky, you couldn't. He kept everything to himself, and he was, even with people who wanted to know what was going on, he was very cool and kind of reserved and very careful with anything that got out there. So it was hard to know kind of how he went about recruitments. Obviously he was very successful at them. And again, the players, and especially the families and parents of kids who he recruited, thought a lot about him from the very beginning. I think there's two kinds of really successful recruiters that I've come across, and obviously you have to make those connections very early on and get in there and make people comfortable with you and comfortable with the idea of coming to play for you or sending their kid to come and play for you. And there's one side that's very exuberant, over the top, just can like go talk to a telephone post for 30 minutes and the telephone post thinks they've known each other their whole lives. And then there's another one who just kind of goes in and lays things out, and on the surface might seem, like not as engaged, but once you're there and you're seeing it, is very engaged, and it's just not trying to really sell you on anything. And that might be at least from what I gathered, kind of how to wrap up how Kenny Payne was as a recruiter, is he wasn't selling something. He was just kind of, again, telling it like it was, and this is the experience you're going to get, and this is what we can do for you, and it's your decision. I know, we talked about this, especially toward the end of his Kentucky career. He did not like recruiting coverage. He said it explicitly. He said he didn't like people follow. Like, obviously, if you're going to follow recruiting, you're going to follow recruiting. He has no control over that.
Yeah.
But he didn't like all of the kind of the circus that went along with recruiting. He didn't like recruiting reporters blowing up kids' phones or parents' phones. He thought that relationship should be a very personal thing between a coach and a coaching staff and the kid and his family. And he, I think a lot of coaches feel the other way, that, the more, especially at some other schools, the more you can show, hey, we have these reporters who are covering us. Yep. Look at how much we want you. They're calling you. This is how much we want you. Kenny was the exact opposite. He flat out said, while I was standing there, that, this kind of gets in our, or at least his idea of it was it kind of got in their way, and he wanted that to be a real personal thing, that they more controlled the relationship.
That's it. Well, that will not go over well. There's a couple of guys here who would be frustrated by that, but maybe the staff members will pick up where Kenny leaves off in terms of keeping them abreast of certain things. I want to ask you a question that Kenny was asked about on Friday. Is a question that as you know, has come up quite a bit here in Louisville. NIL has changed this a little bit, but I think people maybe underrate still how important the shoe companies are in all of this, because of you're trying to connect the dots between the grassroots and high school scene to the NBA level and everywhere in between or overseas. Louisville, you may have heard this, is not a Nike school. Kentucky is a Nike school. Kentucky is one of the prized clients of Nike in college sports for obvious reasons. Louisville, one of the prized clients of Adidas in college sports, especially basketball, for obvious reasons. He kind of said, look, it's still relationships at the end of the day. It's still, my job to make those relationships regardless. How much do you think that might be a factor? Because it's a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal to not be working under the same umbrella.
It is. I mean, it's a different deal, but I think he's right. I think it is, especially at that level. If you do it right, which I think you will, I think it is more relationships and connections than it is the actual business ties of Nike or Adidas. Where some guys can get into trouble there is where if you're a head coach and you kind of distance yourself from recruiting and you're a little aloof about it. Like if Kenny Payne were to go in there and not be as involved in recruiting as he was here, as some coaches have been in the past, then there could be some trouble, because those connections don't exist if he's not going to use them.
Right.
But I think it is more about relationships than it is the business relationships of it. And he obviously, with his life in basketball at all levels, has formed as many relationships as just about anybody in college basketball. I mean, we've seen, and as far as I think shoe companies, it is an important deal, but I think it's overblown to the extent that I don't have the list in front of me, but it's a long one. We've seen guys play on certain shoe company circuits and go to different schools. We've seen guys play on certain shoe company circuits and play on the other shoe company circuit a week later.
Or a day later.
Or a day later. And we've seen guys go to Nike and Adidas colleges and then sign with Under Armour or the other Nike or Adidas, sign with a different company out of college when they started their pro career. So at the end of the day, I mean, those guys are going to go with the best deal in front of them. And as far as recruiting at the end of the day, it's going to be the connections and not necessarily the business end of it. And I thought Kenny's answer on that was great. And he said he was prepped for it by Kenny Klein over there.
That was especially good.
that was good too, but it was a good answer. It was like, he brought up, he mentioned William Wesley by name. And he said, these guys are family. They're not, he doesn't see them as connections. He sees them as real relationships and family, and guys that he's known for decades and has had personal relationships with beyond the working relationships. And that's, the guys in Nike right now are the same way. I mean, those are guys that I know he cherishes as friends, and if they went to other jobs that were outside of basketball, I'm sure they would still keep up with each other.
You mentioned Worldwide West, William Wesley. We got to talk about DJ Wagner. This is a big onion to peel here, because he plays for Purvis Ellison's AAU team. It is on the Nike circuit. Our buddy Kyle Tucker tweeted, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, that John Calipari would drive over Kenny Payne or push him in front of a train was his word. Push him in front of a train. That's a very Kyle phrase. push him in front of a train to get DJ Wagner and Aaron Bradshaw for Louisville. But let's talk about DJ Wagner, because I don't think that Louisville fans, I don't think that they aligned in the Kenny Payne camp or the hopefuls that they would sign Kenny Payne or hire Kenny Payne exclusively to get DJ Wagner, because that's kind of short-sighted. But I do think that there is a huge portion of Louisville fans who think because they hired Kenny Payne, well, of course he's going to get his teammate's grandson to come play for him and beat out their arch nemesis for the number one prospect in 2023. What can you tell us about this recruiting process? There's still obviously some time, but we're getting ready now for a big cycle where it's really going to ramp up. And where do you think maybe Kenny Payne and now Louisville stand in that type of a competition?
Well, they stand a lot better right now than they did last Monday or whatever, a week ago. I mean, if Kenny Payne had not gone to Louisville, DJ Wagner, if he played college basketball, which I think he will, was coming to Kentucky. He visited Memphis. He's visited other places. I'm sure he'll keep it open and listen to people, but there's no other way around that. If he was going to play college basketball, it was going to be for John Calipari at Kentucky. And he still might. And Kentucky might even still be the favorite. It's hard to know right now. But yes, Milt Wagner and Kenny Payne were teammates and have stayed in touch a very long time.
Yeah. And Ben, let me just throw this in real quick. As of today, we're recording this on Monday afternoon, the 21st. There has been a very, 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 very large amount of chatter that Milt will have some sort of role on Kenny's staff, whether that's like chief of staff, advisor, special advisor to the head coach, one of those titles that they just figure out a way to get him on staff. So that could be another element to that relationship beyond being teammates and really good friends.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened 20 years ago when John Calipari hired Milt Wagner to be on his staff in Memphis to get DeJuan Wagner.
Hey,
and you mentioned William Wesley. William Wesley kind of broke into this business. He was buddies with Milt Wagner in New Jersey, and that kind of started all that in motion. And obviously, William Wesley and the Wagner family are incredibly close. Yeah, I mean, you could probably write a whole book about this dynamic about Cal, Kenny, the Wagners, World Wide West. But yeah, the bottom line is DJ, I think, was coming to Kentucky a week ago if he'd gone to college, if he played college basketball. And now it's, neither scenario would surprise me. And yeah, there's been a lot of chatter in just general recruiting circles that Milt could get some sort of director of basketball ops or some other job like that on Kenny Payne's staff, which he's had. Obviously, I mentioned Memphis. He had that job with Cal for several years, and then he was on Tony Barbee's staff after that when Barbee became a head coach at UTEP. So he has a lot of experience in that realm. Obviously, he has the ties to Kenny Payne. We'll have to see how it plays out, but right now the 16-year-old kid's kind of in the middle of it.
My favorite thing was people were trying to predict. Our friend Mike Rutherford was joking about when the rivalry will flip back on. When are they going to call IT and IT will tell them, did you try restarting it? And I would imagine that DJ Wagner's recruitment is going to amp it all the way back up again, because if there's one thing we know, it's that recruiting is the lifeblood of all rivalries. And, Louisville fans have been absolutely itching to have their team be in the mix again for some of these guys. And I think the NCAA stuff did hurt them. It's hard to quantify how much. But I also think Chris Mack's preference to just not really get into these longer running recruitments. And he just wanted, as has been told to me numerous times from people who would know, preferred guys who he knew were going to commit relatively soon in the process, or that they felt confident they could get, and kind of punted on the other guys. And obviously we saw what that resulted in. But yeah, Kenny certainly gives them the credibility again in these recruiting battles to go out and pursue some of these big name players. Last thing then, Ben, well, it's a kind of a twofold question for people who would be interested to know, like, playing style. Kenny kind of talked about it, getting out in transition. I think, anybody who has been in the Calipari coaching tree, we can all be adults here and agree it has not been great when guys go off on their own to be head coaches, but typically would like to play that kind of long, athletic, really difficult to go against man-to-man defense with some shot blocking on the tail end. And try to press a little bit when you can. So we're probably expecting something like that. Do you have any inkling whatsoever of what Kenny's preferences might be in terms of playing style and just kind of attitude and the way that his teams would approach the game?
Yeah, I don't. As far as playing style, I think it's impossible to say right now. Just because, as you said, there's not a large group of John Calipari disciples out there coaching at a high level in college basketball. And the ones like Tony, the ones who are head coaches, Tony Barbie he's a zone guy, and he was killing Cal for years. He was over there on the bench telling him we got to play more zone, and that's not Cal's style. So as far as trying to glean styles from stuff like that, it's going to be tough. It's also tough because the few practices that we've been allowed into over the last few years with Cal, hardly anybody else talks. When the whole team's going, it's Cal's practice. And, there will be obviously stuff off to the side, and Kenny's been, everybody knows his renown as a great coach of big men. That's become a thing over the years. But when they're all going, there's not much chatter from the other coaches. It's really the John Calipari show there. So it's really hard to know. And he's never been a head coach, which I know that's been talked about a lot in the lead up to this hire. And he was mentioned as a possible successor to Calipari at Kentucky had things worked out differently. So the not being the head coach, we just, we have no idea what his playing style is going to be. I think the big thing is what kind of players does he get? Because he is, like you said, he's going to be going after much higher level, higher ranked, at least, recruits than Chris Mack was getting. And really even, I think, than Rick Pitino was getting. Pitino got his, several highly touted recruits, but I think there were some people who thought he could have gotten some more highly touted recruits.
A lot of high
profile
misses. Yeah.
The end of his time. And Kenny's going to be in play for a few of those a year, I would think. So yeah, depending on who he gets, I think that's going to be kind of hard to say how he's going to play until we see that. And I do think he spent obviously the last season and a half with the Knicks. So he has some immediate NBA cred there. And obviously the style of basketball in the NBA is a lot different, certainly from what we're seeing at Kentucky and Louisville. And, you watch the NCAA tournament, a lot of these programs around the country. So if he can implement some sort of, more quote unquote, I hate to say it, but modern basketball, it'll be interesting to see who signs up for that.
Yeah. I like the word contemporary. It's a classy word. It's a classy word. I like that. No, that's all a great point. And I think we're all going to enjoy painting him with a broad brush until we truly figure it out. But until then, we're just guessing and trying to figure out what he wants and how they're going to play. It's going to be fascinating to play out. Ben, I think the world of you. I think you're super thorough and have a great attention to detail. I'd love to have you back on maybe in the summertime during the recruiting wars and everything to talk about it a little bit more as fair as they come. And I appreciate it. So thank you so much for chatting with us. And all of the Louisville fans will say, hey, that Kentucky beat writer isn't so bad. And maybe we should like him more. And before I let you go, Ben, we got to get you into the Derby City for some soccer games this summer when you get a weekend free. Give me a shout and I'll help you out.
I'll do that.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jeff.